Hi there. Welcome to a new screencast of PHP. In this screencast, we're going to talk about a very important concept which is called arrays. Now, if you have taken any other programming course or a data structure course, you already know what arrays are. Now, but in PHP, you're going to learn a different kind of array, which is known as an associative array. An associative array, as opposed to a not regular array, provides you with the flexibility of defining your own keys. So let's go ahead and see first. That's why I opened this diagramming tool to give you an overview of the difference between these two types of arrays and why it's important. An associative array in PHP is one of the most important thing and one of the most widely used thing. You will be using that in many other things like authentication or creating cookies, sessions, and many other things. So it's very important that you understand the difference between a regular array and an associative array. Now let's start with the basic concept of arrays. I'm going to draw it first so that you understand it clearly, and then I'm going to go back to our programming environment and then create those arrays in PHP. Let's start with the first one. Let's suppose that the basic definition of an array from a computer programmer or a data structure, from data structure point of view, is that it's a sequence of memory locations with the same name. So let's do that. I suppose I want to create an array with three memory locations. So generally I would do that in a programming language or using something like this, a keyword, something like this. I'll just go ahead and just simply type, let's say the name of this array is Muhammad, okay, and the size is 3. So I'll just use a square bracket to denote the size of this array. I'm just going to make it a little bigger so that you can see it. So let's suppose this is my array. Now what does this statement mean is that I want the system to create an array with the name Muhammad and with three locations, three side-by-side locations. Usually in different programming languages, the array, the memory locations of an array are of the same data type. So for example, if you declare an array Muhammad, you have to specify which data type it is. So for example, I can say integer Muhammad. But as you know, in PHP we don't have any data types, so that means we have the flexibility of storing any value within these memory locations. I could just declare an array and I could store any value inside them. That's the flexibility of using the scripting language PHP. So that's what we did over here. So if I use this statement, I just create an array. I'm just going to go ahead and name this so that easier to follow. I'm going to call this Muhammad, and to make this a little bigger, and then that's the name of the array. Now what happens is, how can I access a location inside this array? Usually they use these indexes. You use the square bracket notation, and then you assign an index to it. So every array starts with a 0 index and goes on to size -1 index. So if my array size is 3, my indexes will start from Muhammad 0, Muhammad 1, and Muhammad 2. So if I go ahead and do the same thing over here, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to copy paste this and then edit that just to show you what are the memory locations. So I'm going to go back again over here, 1, and then again go back over here, and then I'm going to just rename this to 2. So this is what happens. So I have an array with 3 memory locations, and each of them can be accessed using these index or key values, and these key values are assigned by the system automatically. It starts from 0 and goes till the size -1. Okay, and if you want to store something inside this array, you just simply write the statement. Let's suppose I want to say that I want to store the value of inside 1. Let's say I want to store the last name of Muhammad, so I'll just say this way. So if I do something like this, that means what I am commanding the system to do is go to this array and go to that specific location within that array. So that means it's this location, and then store this value over there. So I'm just going to again do the same thing, copy this value and then paste it. Okay, then paste the value. So I'm just going to say this way. So this is what happens. So when you execute the statement, this is what happens. It goes to that location and stores the value. So this is how a normal array works. You can actually store multiple values and then use it by the same reference. So if you want to store something related to Muhammad, you use an array to store all his related information together. It's a very good thing when you are accessing elements from the database, so that you can, when elements comes back for a particular person, you can store all his related information inside a single array and then use it in your program. Now let's see this. These are regular arrays. Now how do we do this regular arrays in PHP? Let's go back and see that. I'm going to open my program, and what I did was I created a new PHP file, arrays.php, and then I started with the delimiters for PHP for writing a basic program. I go ahead inside and then I start writing my arrays. Now arrays usually can be declared or initialized in PHP with two ways. The first way is initialization on declaration. That means you initialize the array during when you declare the array itself. So how do you do that? That's simple. You just put the name of the array. As with all other variables in PHP, you start the name of the array with a $, and then I'm going to use the same name I used earlier, Muhammad, and then say equal to, and then you use the keyword array, and then you use your parentheses, brackets. You don't use the square brackets because square brackets are only specifying the size, but if I want to initialize the values, I use the normal brackets, and then you go back inside and then you specify the values. So for example, let's say in the first value I want to store the first name of Muhammad. You separate all the values by a comma, and the second value I want to store the last name, and let's say on the third value I want to store the GPA. So I'm going to say 3.75, and that's it. It's a number. So that, as remember, I told you that in PHP it allows you the flexibility of storing different data type values inside your array. So the array is not restricted to only one data type. You can store multiple data types inside it. Here I'm using 2 strings and 1 floating point number. So in that case, this is also allowed. Let's go ahead and see what's the other way of doing that. The other way is, first you perform the declaration of the array. So I'm going to call this Muhammad underscore, or just say Muhammad1, the name of the array, and then you declare the array an empty array. In that sense, you just make it as empty. We don't specify any values, you just say it's empty. And then in the next step you go ahead with the initialization. Now how do you initialize the array? It's simple. You just use the name of the array, and then you specify the index. So in that case, an array usually starts from 0, so I'll start from 0 and then specify the value, and then I go ahead and to keep on repeating this. Okay, Muhammad1 of index 1, which is equal to Spahaddin, and then I'm going to do the same thing, Muhammad1, and this time I'm going to go ahead and specify my GPA, which is 3.75. Okay, so this is what happens when I'm working. These are 2 ways of declaring arrays in PHP. The first way is you declare the values, you initialize the values when declaring the array itself. The other way is to declare it separately and then initialize it later on, initialize the values of the array later on. Printing the array, the traditional way is just using the for loop. We saw how to use the for loop in previous screencasts. We saw that we start with the for loop, we use a working variable. In that case, I'm going to use I, the looping variable, and then initialize it to the value 0, because my indexes always start from 0, the semicolon, and the length of the array. Now how do we get the length of the array? In PHP we have a function called count. Count, when given the variable name, let's say over here in that case it is Muhammad, will give me the size of the array. Okay, so I'm going to just say while $I is less than the count of the array, and then, as you know, update statement. I'm going to update the statement, and then I'm going to simply print the array. So I'm going to use the echo statement and then say $Muhammad, and then in the square brackets I'm going to use the $I, because $I is going to start from 0, 1, 2, and then it's going to stop because the size of my array is 3. And then I want to use a break statement so that it appears on different lines, so I'm going to use my PHP code for break inside it, and that's it. That should be how my array is shown. Now let's see how it looks like. Let me run it. See, I'm just getting one value, not sure why. Let's see what happened. Okay, for some reason I don't know what's happening. Let me just go back and see. There was a mistake. No, there was no mistake. Muhammad array, $Muhammad is the array name. Muhammad Muswahaddin 3.75, and then I use for I is equals to 0, I is less than count of Muhammad, and then I say $I plus plus, right? Echo $Muhammad $I. Yeah. Strange that I'm doing everything correctly, and then I echo break, and that should do it, right? Let's echo out the length. I'm not sure if the count function is appropriately working, so I'm going to echo out count of $Muhammad, and then let's see what happens. Let's refresh this. It's 3, so yeah, should be working. For I equal to 0, I is less than the count Muhammad and I plus plus. Why is it just giving me the first value? Okay, I have a strange problem. I didn't close the break tag. Oh, that's harsh. Okay, I'm just going to refresh that. Okay, that's okay now. So I'm getting the display of my array. Now this is the first way of actually displaying your array, is using the traditional for loop. Now there is another way of displaying the array, and so of using the for loop. You remember in JavaScript we had one more method of doing the same thing, that was, I would say, for $I in the name of the array, what's Muhammad. So in this case, whenever I use something like this, that means I don't have to specify the size. It just goes starting from the first till the end. Now PHP also has the same concept, not like this, but it has a different name for the array. It doesn't use the for state. Sorry, not the name of the array. It has a different name for the function itself. It's not for, as in JavaScript, the same name. It uses a specific name which is called foreach. Now foreach works in a different way. It doesn't say $I in Muhammad. It says $Muhammad as something. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to say for $Muhammad as $I. Okay, that should be it. Now there is a very big difference between using this and this. You see, when I was using in, the $I was actually acting as a looping variable, so the value of I would be 0, 1, 2, 3. That means the value is usually the index. But when I use for each, the value of I is not the index. It is actually the value of $Muhammad. So I don't have to write something like this. I don't have to write something like this, $Muhammad $I. Because if I had the index, I could have written something like this and it would have worked. But over here, when I'm using for each, the $I is not actually the index value, but it is the actual value of it. So how to do that is just simply printing out $I. Okay, that's the correct way of doing that. I'm going to remove this $. So this is the same. You will see that. So example, if I print this, you will see that Muhammad Misbahuddin, Muhammad Misbahuddin 3.75. I'm not using a break, that's why it's appearing on the same line, but you get the concept. It doesn't, just be aware that whenever you're using for each, $I is not the index. It's not 0 1 2 3 as in your traditional for loop. It is the actual value of the array. So I'm not using $I as a counter, but it is used as a working variable. Working variable means it contains the value that I want to print. Okay, so that's one thing that you have to really take care about. So you have to remember that. I'm just going to put a break here so that it displays it neatly. Okay, I'm just going to go back and say refresh, and yeah, that looks good now. So this is how a traditional array works. This is how we initialize a traditional array using the first method. This is how we initialize the array using the second method, declaration separately, then initialization. And to display the array, we have two different methods. The first way is a traditional for loop, but the difference is I have to go specify the size from beginning till the counting and then go ahead. But there is another method where if you want to display the complete array starting from the first till the end, then you can use another function called for each, and the for each uses $Muhammad as the first input and then uses a keyword called as and $I. An integral difference between these two is that $I is not the counter, it's the working variable. That means it now contains the value of $Muhammad in each iteration and not the counter. So this will not work. This echo statement over here will not work because $I is actually the value, and then I just say echo break, so to put it on this different line. So this is how a normal array works. Now let's go back to a drawing board and see the other type of array that I was talking about. So this was a regular array in PHP. The other kind of array that is very prominent or very popular in PHP is an associative array. Let me spell that for you. It's usually something like this. I'm just going to write it over here. Okay, I'm just going to increase the size so that it's visible. Okay, that's good. So this is an associative array. Now what is what is an associative array? Let me just give you an explanation based on the contrast of a regular array. In the regular array, you saw that we have a name for the array, and each array we have a size which is 3 over here, and the index, the 0 1 2 3, the index value is assigned automatically by the system. It starts from 0, then goes to 1, and then goes to 2. In an associative array, it gives you the freedom of actually defining your own indexes. It can be integers, it can be even strings. So for example, if I have to take this over here and then I want to put it as a copy to work with it, in this case I don't have to stick with 0, although I can assign it 0. It's up to me. It's because the key value is assigned by me itself. So I can stick to 0 as it is because it can accept integers or floating point numbers, but I want to assign it meaningful values. So for example, let's see, in this array that we created in the program, the first index contained my first name, the second index contained my last name, the third index contained my GPA. So in that case, I'm going to go back to my page, and then why not assign meaningful keys to them? So in that case, I'm just going to say first, and then over here I'm going to go ahead and then say last, and then here I'm going to go ahead and say GPA. Okay, so now this way each of my items inside the associative array has a specific key name. See, first, last, and GPA. The good thing about using an associative array that it's complete. You see, suppose I give you this array with values such as Muhammad Misbahuddin 3.75. You will guess that okay, this looks like an integer, it's like a name, and this looks like a name as well. So maybe it's first or last name, I don't know, because it's just 0 and 1. And the third value is a number 3.75. It can be anything. If I'm not a student, it can be something else, right? It can be average of the number of miles I run per week or something like that. Now the issue is, when I give you this, now the array is complete. You actually understand what it means. We actually know that this value is the first name, this value is the last name, and this value is the GPA. So a very powerful point of using an associative array, it allows you the flexibility of defining your own indexes. In this way, your whole array is complete. Your whole array is complete. If I ask you to get the GPA, you will not have to remember that the GPA is actually stored in index number 2. You just have to say Muhammad and then put GPA. So that's the power of using an associative array. Okay, hope this difference was very clear, because this is one of the major advantage of using an associative array. Let's go back and see how to do that, to declare an associative array in PHP. The first thing, it also has the same two methods of declaration. It's using initialization on declaration. Since I'm talking about associative arrays, I'm just going to put over here associative arrays. Okay, so the declaration will go something like this. I'm going to put $Muhammad. This time I'm going to use an assoc, so it's an associative array, and then I use the same keyword array. The only difference is now, because see, I told you that you have the flexibility of defining your own indexes, so now you can actually define the index and the value. So how to pair them together in PHP, you just need to use a special symbol. So first you define the key or the index. So in that case, my index was first, and then you use this symbol. This symbol is a combination of using an equal sign and a greater than sign. In that case, after that you assign the value of that. So it's, in this case, it was Muhammad, right? And then you separate them by comma, and you move on the same way as you did earlier. You just have to use this special symbol that it is a combination of an equal sign and an equal sign and a greater than sign. Okay, let's say comma again, and this time the last one is GPA, and then I'm going to use the symbol again and assign the value. Since it's a string, since it's an integer or a floating point number, I don't need to use quotations. I'll just simply put this normal way and then go ahead and move on. Okay, so that's the first way of declaring an associative array, with the first method where you actually initialize the values during the declaration process. Another way is declaration first, which is the same as earlier. So I'm going to say Muhammad1 underscore assoc equal to array, and then that's it. And then I'm going to follow it up with initialization, and this way I'm going to have the same method of initializing. The only difference is, instead of using 0 and 1s, again I will use my own keys. So it will be first, and then I'm going to go ahead and say Muhammad, and then okay, and then I'm going to follow up with the last one, which is Muhammad1 underscore assoc. At this time it's a GPA, so I again go to GPA and then say equal to 3.75. okay, yep, that's it. That's how you do that. The only difference is, instead of using zeros and ones, I'm using actual strings. It can be integers. It can be integers, but strings are more meaningful. You assign it a string. You know, you can describe whatever this is over here using the string value. Okay, so that's how we work with associative arrays. Printing an associative array, exactly the same as what we did earlier. Both the methods work. Both the methods work when you're working with an associative array. The only difference is, this method would not be very useful, because I don't have indexes assigned 0, 1, 2, 3. So I cannot use this method now. I cannot use this method. I can actually count the numbers, but displaying the values would be a very difficult task using this method. So the only method I'm left out with using is using the foreach method. So I'm going to call foreach, and I need to say $Muhammad1 underscore assoc as $I, and then I'm going to echo out $Muhammad, sorry, I just have to use I because you remember that I told you it's a working variable, and I want to use a break, so I'm going to use a break inside this, and that's it. That's what's supposed to work. Let me go back again, go back to my program, refresh that, and voila, this is what you see over here. So this is how we work with associative arrays. Now before we finish this screencast, I'm going to talk about a small thing. See, this using for each like this, I could just get the value of my array. Now I told you an associative array actually stores two things. It stores the index and it also stores the value of that index. So I'm storing two things. So if I just use this format, I'm just getting the value. $I will be the value. Suppose I want to get the key as well. Now how do I do that? Very simple. If you want to get the key as well, I'm going to do that again for each. In this case, I'm going to use $Muhammad1 underscore assoc, and this time as, but instead of saying just $I can say $I and then use the same combination of symbol and then say $K. Now what does this mean? This means that $I will contain the key and $K will contain the value of that key in each iteration. So I can just simply echo something like this, echo, say $I, and then I want to just use the same keyword over here, and then say dot and then $K, and then I'm going to use a break. This is just to showcase you that we can also retrieve the key value in each iteration. It's just not the value. We can also get the key value if we use this format of calling the function. So this way I'm just going to display $I and then $K. I'm using concatenation and just displaying this symbol to showcase you that the left hand side will be, it's not a keyword over here because it's just a string to display on the screen. I'm going to go back and then refresh this. You see, the key value now, $I is first and $K is Muhammad. In the second iteration, $I is last and then $K is Misbahaddin. And in the third iteration, I'll have $I as GPA and $K as 3.75. Okay, so well, that's all about associative arrays. Simple enough. It gives you a lot of flexibility. It's very powerful, used in different aspects and concepts of PHP. You will see in future screencasts that we are going to use this concept a lot. Although this concept is going to become a little difficult when we talk about more dimensions, if we talk about a two-dimensional array or a multi-dimensional array. Okay, so we're going to deal with that difficulty in the next screencast. For now, practice these kinds of arrays. Just try to grasp the difference between a regular array and an associative array. Okay, that's it.